Greetings, my fellow citizens. I'm coming here to talk to you about a very serious issue that should have been resolved centuries ago. First of all, you need to know that I am an actual Republican, not a conservative or any other kind of Democrat. I am a Republican. And as a Republican, I am staunchly opposed to the institution of the police. Let me make it quite clear. I don't fear the police. I have no need for the police, and neither do any of us. The police are unnecessary, and that's why I am suggesting that we abolish the police, eliminate them as a institution. Our Constitution makes no provision for the police, not a single one, whereas the militia is mentioned in the body of the Constitution and in the Second Amendment. And again, the conservatives like to ignore that part of it, but that is crucial. We are a union of states that are supposed to have a Republican form of government in each of them. And we are built upon the notion that we have communities. Not that we're trembling in fear of the boogeyman, he's going to come at us, and so we need to call the police. My family background, the part that is prior to coming here in the 19th century, comes from Sherman family and the Delano family, amongst other families. But those two in particular have the notion that we shouldn't be fearful in the conduct of our affairs, in the conduct of our civic affairs, and in the conduct of our country's affairs. I wrote a little piece. I'm just going to read from you a little bit from it here to further emphasize why I am calling for to abolish the police. I'm not caring about this defunding. Those are half measures. We need to abolish the police, and we need to establish the well-regulated militia. But even outside of that, we need to abolish the police. This is why. What democracy does is persecute one category of people, which democracy says are evil, in the name of another category, which democracy says are they're good, they're angels. In this way, democracy incites the revenge of the persecuted against those in the other category, instead of against democracy itself. The people in a community, in a communist household, pay no heed to the democratic categorization and morality of an occupying democracy and its gendarmes, the police. Instead, they see their neighbors as neighbors, not as the boogeymen which that democracy claims they are. They know that the police are unnecessary. That's why I say, and have been saying for decades, to deaf ears all these years, abolish the police. Get rid of them. Conservatives, including real Donald Trump, the conservative rhino, are apoplectic whenever I say this. They do not live in communities. They live in cul-de-sacs. They have no idea how communities work, or have forgotten how, so that they can kiss the rhetorical boots of the unconstitutional standing armies and call it patriotism. Meanwhile, their friends at the democratic institution of the police threaten to walk off the job, as if that would hurt our communities or Republican communities at all, whenever any reform is suggested for their unnecessary institution. If we abolish the police, we will call their bluff. Go ahead, walk off the job. Hand in your badge and your guns. We don't need you anymore. We never needed you in the first place. Sooner or later, we'll have to form again our well-regulated militia to protect our republics of communities from invading forces such as the police. So if not everybody does that and there's some police force, we're going to have a militia to block the police from coming into our towns. And that is simply a precaution, an advisable precaution. Because why? Because there's democracies in the world, and democracies have armies. Sometimes they call them police, and sometimes they call them armies, and sometimes they call them military advisors. Now, I set forth in my treatise on political economy the basis for eliminating armies and war entirely. And that comes down to the notion that every political economy has to pay the cost of its own sovereignty. Otherwise, there will be competing alternative political economies. The ones that the conservatives call crime or criminals or other kinds of boogeymen, terrorists. Yeah, we have that. We've got this country where all these politicians have declared war on terror. It's a war on the boogeyman. My cousin Franklin famously stated about not having anything to fear except fear itself. Well, we shouldn't even be fearing fear. We just should be staunchly deciding that we have no reason to fear. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. Some of you who are of the way of Christ, like myself, would recognize that expression, that statement. We really have nothing to fear. And the only thing that fear does is divide us. And that is exactly how democracy works, and that's exactly how the police work. They divide us. So I'm calling on you and any politician that has any sort of sense, any public official that has any sense, to abolish the police, to establish a provision of the necessities that's not dependent upon anything else, that's not going to create an alternative political economy. In other words, I'm asking for a $1,500 weekly citizen stipend, which is to be established in this manner to fulfill the provisions of the Constitution, to have a uniform rule of naturalization for the people in this country. That is $40 a week when you arrive, whether you come as an infant, baby in arms, or whether you come as a immigrant, however you come as an immigrant. And then $4 additional per week for the next 365 weeks. At which point you will have been in this country roughly 7 years, and the total will be $1,460 plus your $40 initial, and that gets you to $1,500 as a weekly citizen stipend. And yes, this is flexible. That same procedure could be $15 a week if our economy made that a sufficient provision of the necessities. And it's going to be unconditional. It'll be unconditional because it will be something that is given to citizens gratis. And then what do citizens do with that? They spend it. They spend it on the necessities. They spend it on the housing. They spend it on the clothing. They spend it on the food. They spend it on other things that they need to clear out of their current debts and obligations, and so forth. Or to save, or to invest, actually invest, to start a business with their fellows, with their community, to invest in a new venture. And if it happens to succeed, great. And if it happens to fail, well, they just lose their investment. So they're freed from debt, and they are freed from having to work for somebody in a condition of either slavery or serfdom in order to have a survival income. So this is how that provision of the necessities will work. That's how this $1,500 a weekly citizen stipend would work to enable all of us to be free. Free from the landlords, free from the lords of employment, free from the moneylenders, the usurers, so that we can live our lives in peace in our communist households, and we can decide within those communist households, or as I call them in Popular Capitalism, my book explaining all this stuff, I call them colleges of extended families. And so those colleges then invest. And those colleges, receiving a quarter of the provision, also set up the environment, the farm, on which the people can live. And this gets to another point. This current pandemic would have not been a pandemic if we had the $1,500 weekly citizen stipend and if we had colleges of extended families. Why? Because we would be within our communist walls. The minute any inkling that something was coming over from overseas, we'd be able to close off that communist household, close off that college, live our life intramurally, and protect us from the incursion of a disease, of an infectious disease. And if perchance somebody within our college had gotten it on some travels, we would already have within those colleges, within our particular college, a infirmary so that they can be quarantined within the infirmary. And if perchance there is something well beyond the capability of that infirmary, the Republican aspect of this system, this urban federalist system built upon colleges of extended families, would be able to handle bringing patients over from the infirmaries and the colleges to hospitals that were better equipped to treat rare diseases and therefore keep things away from some of the other colleges and keep the infected people out of the particular college so that they're protected. And we could have done the shutdown there. We, in fact, could have done the shutdown even without that structure if we implemented the $1,500 weekly citizen stipend. Why? Because under our current system, people go to work sick. And it's the fact that people feel that they, in fact, have to go to work in order to survive, that they have spread the disease. They've either gotten it themselves by going to a place where people are sick, or they have brought it with them, or they have gotten it by commuting to it. And no, cars aren't going to protect you on that either. Why? Because people get out of cars. They get a cup of coffee, donut, a bagel, whatever, and they go into work. Well, you know, the bagel shop and somebody there had it and they spread it to you. So, no, automobiles don't protect you at all. You go into the parking lot, and unless you're in a very uncrowded parking lot, you're parked far, far away, you're going to have people that are going to be coming out of their cars. And there's another place where you could have gotten it. So, no, private automobiles, or actually mercantilist automobiles, we'll get into that later, at a later date, are not going to protect you. The only thing that protects people in a pandemic is the ability not to work sick. And that's why I've been saying from the outset on that, and you'll see on one of my other videos, the argument made that we needed to do that first and foremost before any of the social distancing, before anything else is done. The testing's not necessary for that. The certainly the contact tracing, which is a gross violation of the Fourth Amendment, is not necessary for that. The only thing that's necessary is to enable people to stay home when they are tired, when they are sick, when they are otherwise encumbered in their health or their vulnerability to disease, keep them from trying to go to work when they really should be going to work. And that's a general rule anyhow. I've worked with somebody who died because they overworked. It was at Merrill Lynch, and the fellow just worked too hard, had a heart attack. So the $1,500 weekly citizen stipend is a crucial public health measure, as well as a way of ending crime, as well as a way of allowing our system to properly allocate labor and other resources in the production of goods, not just here in the United States, but abroad. You may or may not have heard of something called comparative advantage. This is something that was laid out by David Ricardo at the beginning of the 19th century, so the 1800s, 1812, so that notion is one where we let people work at jobs that they are working because it's worth their while, what they're getting paid for. And people overseas are doing the same thing. And similarly, they are using products, inputs, factors, other factors in the production of these goods. And those also brought into the equation. And a comparative advantage is a little more subtle than a lot of people try to make it. It is comparative comparatives. So if what we're producing here in the United States in terms of, say, sneakers, compared to what we produce in terms of hubcaps, is more efficient than what they do in China with respect to sneakers versus hubcaps, or France versus sneakers versus hubcaps, then we will get more of the sneaker production than some of those other countries, until the increase in our sneaker production versus hubcap production, and they'll be producing more hubcaps, until those balance out. They balance out because of the various currencies which are allowed to free float. Well, we've gotten into the weeds, I think, here a little bit, but again, the basic idea here is that we need to abolish the police. We can do that right off the bat. People, your neighbors, are, if they're going to attack you, there's going to be a reason. They're hurting, or somebody hurt them, or there are things which are not making your community much of a community. And furthermore, as somebody who is a person of faith, you go about your life in the presumption that your neighbors are going to be kind. And so you're kind to them. Something called the golden rule, remember that? Do unto others as you would have them do to you. We can do this. We can do this. So, abolish the police. Let's get the $1,500 weekly citizen stipend in place as a first step. I've got a few other ideas to make sure things work properly, but those are the good things to start with, and that will end the police, and hence will end police brutality. And that's, I think, enough for today. In the notes, I'll have a reference to the article that I read from. So have a good day, be of good cheer, and just be cool. Well, this is the point at which YouTube channels customarily ask you for money to buy premium something or others and merchandise, but you don't have a survival income. Most of you don't. And so you're just trying to survive on what you happen to have in the house. So I'm not going to ask you for anything. Just watch the video, share it, subscribe to the channel, and hopefully people will be listening to what I've been trying to say for years and years and years and years. Thanks. Bye.